is research study, research design. And if you guys are not here for research and study design, then I think you're in the wrong group. Are you guys seeing the screen? Type in the chat if you're seeing the screen, because some people said they're not seeing it. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. No. Okay. If you're not seeing the screen, just get out of the group and come back, because it might be something going on. But I will get started. So research design, it has a 5-step system to begin it off. Well, 4-step, and then we'll get into the 5th, which is the information on it. So the first thing that you always want to do when working with research designs, program evaluation, and program development is identify a specific topic/target area, population or area of study. So population/area of study. So what this is going to do, this will help guide the design and help funnel your focus and efforts into, that's bigger than it normally is, into a particular area. And then so the basic thing that we're doing in this step is identifying the who, the what, the where, the how, and the why. This will be the framework to the next step. And with this, once we do this, will allow for us to be more focused on the particular area. And with that, keep both of these boxes open. We have, once we identify what we need, this is where we save ourselves a lot of time, because as social workers, our time is super duper valuable. So this is where we review the literature available to us. And this may include previous studies completed and informational articles, colleagues, and a key thing to keep in mind here, because I'll keep quotes if those that don't know. And this is more or less the no need to reinvent the wheel here. I can see only hear someone yelling, Jasmine. I don't hear anyone yelling. Are you guys, please mute mics. I don't hear anyone. Same with me. I literally, hell please, is anyone's mic? I don't hear anyone. It's a miracle I can hear. Okay, me too. Are you guys hearing me okay, or is something still wonking? I can only hear. You guys can't see the screen? Okay. I'm just making sure I'm not nuts, guys. I'm sorry. No, I had to go into the app to fix audio. Okay. So this is where we have choose the best design for the study. So after we go from identifying what we need to do or what we'd like to do, then we need to figure out what is done before us to save us some pretty much time, as well as we need to choose what the best design for the study is. And then afterwards is we identify the things that we need to evaluate the results. So we evaluate and decipher or distribute them to needed parties of interest. And those that are new to the groups, I do send this Word document out to you guys. So don't feel like you have to rush and speed through this. I will be sending this out as well as this recording. So once we figure out the 4 steps, and I'll review them briefly for those that couldn't like hear and see before, we want to identify what we're doing, review the literature. Once we figure out what is done, do we want to choose our own design or figure out what someone else has done? And then we have to evaluate the results and decipher and distribute them to the needed parties of interest. And it looks like those that can't hear, if you can download the Zoom app, it looks like it fixed it for some people. So once we figure out that, we need to choose the particular design. But before that, we have some considerations to decipher through. So we have 2 forms of consent or assent. And with these 2, they're the driving force to all of our studies. So consent is where anyone who is over the age of 18 and in sound mind, body, and reason. Okay, guys, cut it out in the Skype chat because I can't keep having this. Yes. So give some resolve. All right. And since people are muted, that way I'll have it. So you have sound mind, body, and reason. And then the assent is anyone who is under the age of 18. As I say that, someone unmutes their mic. You sly dogs. All right. Please keep your mics muted. Okay. So anyone under the age of 18 or anyone who has a cognitive disability. And a little caveat here, if someone is deemed incompetent in the moment, they cannot consent or assent. Such as if they're hospitalized or anything along those lines. So once we have those, you also want to keep in mind that assent requires a parent or legal guardian's consent as well. Because you want to keep in mind that if they're not able to consent, they need someone else to be able to do that with and for them. And then we get into the actual nut and bolts of research. So research research concepts / designs. So within here, we have 2 studies. We have quantitative and we have qualitative. So quantitative is research that involves numerical data / analysis of a large number of people. And a key thing to remember within these, whoops, did not mean to indent it that much, is the N in quantitative could lead you to numerical. So N equals numerical. Or if you look closely within the word quantitative, it has the word quantity in it. So if you see quantity and qualitative, means they're doing a large number of stuff. And with that,
You good?
mute the mic. Okay. So then qualitative, we're looking at research. Whoops. research that involves open-ended questions and relies on word analysis. And another thing to keep in mind within quantitative is we're looking at deductive type research. And what does that mean? So that is research that involves predetermined hypothesis, independent variables, and we'll say independent variables, and then dependent variable and or variables, because we could be running a research study that involves multiple components, but simplistically we have predetermined factors to look at. And then with qualitative, we're looking at, since there's the word L in there, it's the L equals language. So this is the type of research that involves language analysis. And within this as well, if you look deeply into the word qualitative, it has the word quality, thus does not involve a lot of numbers. So do you make sure you're setting, so so far, do we have any questions? So Diana Jones, but for consent under 18, couldn't an adult give written consent? Yes. So with assent, if someone is deemed like if they're underage, like under the age of 18, the parent can give a parent like consent as well. But you'd also want to make sure the kid that is willing to engage as well. So that's a good question, a good point. So then once we get into the quantitative as well as qualitative, then we have to look in the type of variables. So we have numerical and linguistic, and then the type of variables that we're looking at is independent and dependent. So within independent, this is where we're looking at this intervention or proposed. Okay. Proposed intervention / condition we as researchers introduce or to manipulate for the sake of measuring change. So if you think about it, the independent thing, the key thing to keep in mind here, does not require anything to be included in the study. So the word independent, meaning it happens on its own and is proposed. So once it is introduced, it is free to make change or stay the same. So after that, and an example of this is if we had a substance use agency that we were trying to measure type of transportation in an outpatient clinic. So let's say our admission rates are low and people aren't really showing up to their appointments. And then a smart researcher was like, hey, let's see if transportation's a barrier. So an example of within that is transportation would be the independent variable because it's the thing that we introduced within the study to make the change. And then the dependent variable would be, the dependent variable is the result of the introduction of the independent variable. So in the substance use example, the attendance of the participants due to increased access to transportation would be the dependent variable there, because due to the introduction of the independent variable or the transportation, the attendance or the dependent variable would either go up or go down or stay the same, and that is what we're actually measuring here. So with that, another example of each, so I'll provide more than one example for a lot of these because sometimes it doesn't resonate with people. So let's say an example, if I wanted to do a research study on my study group, if I started tracking people's attendance, how many groups people came to, and how active they were in the chat, or if they stayed after to talk to me, what the result would be. So the independent variable here would be the study group, because it's something that I'm introducing to other people to try to provoke change or try to make something different for them. So in that example, if you would like to type in the chat what you think the dependent variable would be. All right, guys, don't be so shy now. Do you guys know? Attendance. Say it again. Okay, so if I was doing a research study, so let me type it out. So Phil is conducting a research study on how effective his study groups are in helping people pass the ASWB exams. He started doing study groups and measuring the attendance of the participants and the result on the exam. What is the dependent variable? So the results of students passing the test or attendance. Okay, test results. Okay. So what else do you guys think? The results people got on the exam. So yeah, the correct answer here is, yeah, the result of the people on the exam. And the independent variable, again, would be my study group. So a quick little study would be, is my study group effective based on people's results? And then given it's a little more complex because then we have to do how many sessions and stuff like that. But beyond that, yeah, at the most minute level, that is what we're looking at there. So thank you guys for those that participated, as well as I'm glad that people caught on to that really, really quick. So then we get in the types of the research design. So we have three particular designs that we often see. Some people introduce more. I just keep to the minute little level of the three because the three are the most common. So the first type that I'll introduce is the true experimental / you can call it the randomized control as well. And so what this particular thing is subjects are randomly assigned to either a intervention group or a control group. And the difference between those is an intervention group participants are given the independent variable. So if you think about it, the intervention, if you think about doing an intervention as a clinician, you're introducing something. So the intervention group are the people that actually get the intervention or the independent variable. So I have had people that just take the word intervention out and just put independent group for it to symbolize independent variable. And then the control group are the participants who do not get the independent variable. And as you can imagine in social work, it's not very common due to ethical reasons, i.e., it is not ethical to withhold treatment that could be beneficial. And however, this is the best possible option when studying a particular intervention because it limits the amount of bias the researchers have around the results, such as if I have no clue who gets the independent variable and the dependent variable, it's very difficult because if I give someone the independent variable, I can't really manipulate to make it seem like my intervention is better and fiddle with the dependent of saying, oh my gosh, my study groups are really great because I picked only these particular people that can attend because I know that they're more intelligent or they got this close to their last exam score. Which is very unethical, only offering it to a certain amount of people. However, that's why it's kind of a true experimental. But the type of studies we can look at is this can involve both qualitative, and I'll just abbreviate it, qualitative and quantitative. I knew that was going to be wrong. There's an I there. There we go. And quantitative. However, if you can imagine, quantitative is more common because you wouldn't want to be able to sit down with a whole bunch of people and interview them for a randomized trial. If I ask somebody, hey, how effective did you think my study group was? And they're like, I wasn't even in your study group. And then I'm like, oh, that's right. They don't really know if they got the independent variable or not. So people can't really speak to something they don't know that they've received. But that is why it's more beneficial because even the participants don't entirely know what's going on. And that is where we look at our next option, which is the forefront of what social work has been built on beyond what Freud did back in the day before the ethical considerations and stuff happened. So quasi-experimental is the most common in social work. And for that reason, it's because subjects are in pre-existing groups and there is no randomization. Thus, everyone is given the independent variable. And that's why it's the most common in social work because we don't really withhold a lot of treatments. But with that, if we don't withhold anything, it makes it difficult to decipher between actual change and outside factors. So this type of research study attempts to isolate from outside factors, but is difficult. So a lot of you guys, I've seen you guys around, and you guys are in different chats and stuff like that. Some of you guys are doing SHIN's social work to social work program. Some people are doing therapist development. Some people are doing LEAP. Some people are doing social work prep. And it'd be idiotic for me to take all the credit for people's other participations in the groups. Like, this is a 2-hour session every Sunday. So it's hard for me to isolate out the actual impact based on that. However, what makes it more privy is the most common style of study framework is qualitative. So if you can imagine, you're getting more language and feedback from the people rather than them just checking a survey form of, did you find this effective? Did you not? Yet quantitative is used as well. So if you guys work in an agency and you guys do surveys, a lot of people will give a satisfaction survey, like 5-10 questions. What'd you think about your stay? What'd you think about this? And most clients will look at it and just circle whatever response gets them out of the office faster and roams off, which makes it difficult for us to make causal or correlation type connections. Like, but again, it's the most common due to like funding as well as access. So the third is non-experimental / single subject. So it goes by both names, and that's because the person is their own type control on this. So in this particular study, the researcher does not introduce any independent variable or make any particular changes to the client's, well, we'll say participant's situation / condition for the subject. Yeah. And as we look at this, data is more or less collected via interview or surveys, which is the good old qualitative, because it's quality and we're getting a little more privy about people's perspectives, and the person is their own control, which is basically fancy for saying the person is responsible. Oh, my hands are not working. Responsible for their change or demise, which I will move this down so it's all on the same page. So that way it's nicer and you guys don't have to, but can you conduct demise? And then with this is basically the findings / solution within this type of study is dependent on the participants' willingness to change. But with this, it's very difficult to collect because you're looking at whether someone wants to change or not. And it'll make more sense when I get an example going. So an example of this is medication compliance. So to elaborate a little more, the psychiatrist gives a client who has bipolar disorder Depakote. Client goes home and forgets to start taking the medication. Their symptoms do not improve. Thus, they were responsible for their consistent situation. So within that, nothing was really introduced particular. Psychiatrist was like, hey, here's some medications I think would be helpful for your particular disorder. Client goes home, doesn't really feel like taking them or forgets to start taking them, and thus their mental health doesn't improve. However, this can be done in group type settings. It's just a little more difficult to keep it together unless it's a super structured group. Such as an example for a group, Phil provides information on research, program development, and program evaluation, as well as the recording after his group. How many people are here today? 31? 34. 30 out of the 34 people, 20 review it after, and the other 14 forget about the information in group. Phil provides an interview with the participants and asks them how the information has helped their prep. So and then it would be varying degrees. So in this group, if I am going to provide the information out as well as the recording. Whether you guys use it or not is up to you guys and could either help, harm, or keep you guys in the same boat. So that is like an example of a group based. It's very much hard though, because let's say I email this out and send the recording and I'm not able to track any of you guys down afterwards. It's hard for me to collect it. You know what I mean? Like you can't really get information from people that you can't really track them down. So this is why, if you remember, it's just a non-experimental, because it's not really an experiment. It's based on, you're not really finding anything. It's all based on the person involved, whether anything happens or not. And with that, qualitative is most common, for the sake of, if you can get a couple people interviewed, it'll yield you more benefit than detriment. If I try getting quantity, since there's only 34 of us, let's say I'm only able to track down 5, I'm not going to be able to generalize anything. So out of what the information we've covered so far, does that all make sense to everyone? Type yes into the chat if it made sense. And no if you want more. You need a base on the floor. Need more. Chrissy, say a little bit more about that. Addie, say a little bit more about that. Like, what more would you guys need about research? Because I'm going to do data collection and then move on to program development. So more examples. Examples of what type of research design in general? No, not really, because the test does not have that many questions on this. Could you do a quick review of it all? Qualitative. Yes. Okay. Can you go back to the independent and provide more clarity? Yes. Okay. So basic quick overview, and then I'll take a pit stop in independent and dependent variable land, and then do Qualitative. Yes, qualitative and independent variable. So the very bare bones, we need to figure out what we're doing with it, who, what, where, and why of what we're actually doing. So we can base this on the ASWB exam. So with this, identifying a particular goal, pass and fail rates of the ASWB practice exam. What did I review? What are other people doing that came before me? Well, people are doing information reviews. Some people are making videos, but no one was doing entirely audio based stuff. So that was where I was like, oh, there's a gap here where I can do audio based stuff. So what was my design for the study? So that's where it gets tricky because I'm not really evaluating this, but if I wanted to, I would do more or less qualitative, since I can only tutor so many people as well as too many people in the study group. And then how am I going to evaluate my results? I personally track how many sessions people had with me, how many study groups, as well as what their improvements were on the exam or whether they pass or fail. So what my considerations are, no one really consents, because if you're working with me, you more or less would like to anyway. I'm not coercing anyone, I'm not really forcing anyone, saying, you're getting tutored right now, or you're in my study group or else. It's more or less like, okay, you guys can come if you want. However, if I was doing a quantitative, this would more or less be like, example, satisfaction. There's no I before. Hands are breaking. So satisfaction surveys. And then qualitative, to give a little bit more elaborate on this is more or less doing, so like example, doing interviews, asking people for specific feedback, and then phone questionnaires, because you more or less take out the necessity of that impersonal type thing. And then once we get rolling down, we have the independent and the dependent variables. So the independent variable, another example would be, let's say I developed a prep course, and anyone that's ever done a study group with me, I just offered it to them if they failed the exam 2 or more times. So I introduce a prep course, and I want to see if it helps the people that have failed more than 2 times pass the exam. So in this example, the independent variable would be the prep course, because it's the thing that I'm utilizing to try and make change about the situation. And with that, the dependent variable, which is the thing that is dependent on whatever I do. Let's say I produce a prep course that was like super extensive and no one made sense of it. The example of the dependent variable would be the result on the exam or increase of score. So once we go through that, we have the types of research design, the true experimental and randomized, and that is where people are selected in different groups. Some people get the study prep course, other people do not. And then I try to compare, did people that didn't take my prep course comparative to who did do better or worse? And then quasi-experimental would be where everyone gets my prep course. I just gift it to everybody in this group and say, go have fun with it and provide feedback on it, i.e. qualitative type information, because you guys would be given specific feedback rather than just rating it on a scale of 1 to 5. And then non-experimental would be that if I gave you guys the link to my prep course, some people used it, some people didn't, some people benefited, some people didn't, or some people benefited who didn't use it, and some people didn't who used it. So the non-experimental, you put the ball in more or less their court. So does that make sense now? Okay. Okay. So let me whip out data collection and then do program development and then eval. And then I do have some practice questions after this, guys. So don't worry. Hang tight with me. Those that have not been in my groups, sometimes I don't get through all of it in the 2 hours. So I just push past it and make sure you guys get what you came for. So the two types of data collection are cross-sectional, or we have number two, which is longitudinal. Sound it out, Phil. Longitudinal. There we go. So cross-sectional emphasis is going to be on like section. So we're trying to isolate a particular section of time. So this is where all the data is collected at one time or over a specific length of time. And this is short-term type business. And what does this look like though, right? So typical, so like let's say it's over 3 months to 1 year. And that is where we have the different data collection, such as like the AB, and then you have the ABAB type data collections here. So like an A would be like I collected at the beginning to get a baseline, and a B I collected at the end to get it. And more of this choppy ABAB style stuff would be I have a baseline, I collected at 3 months, I collected at 6, and then I collected at the year. So that is just different data collection points. So if you see anything like that on the exam of like, this is an ABAB, what would be most beneficial? Because somebody that just took it on Saturday said, whoa, I had way more research than I thought I would. Phil, thank you for providing that. And I was like, it's a crapshoot what you're going to get on this exam. So that's why some topics I do are more of interest to people, but every piece of information that you can get on topics that makes sense to you and it's in a way that you understand is beneficial. Whoops. So with that, you want to then know the research is completed after the particular time frame.
Lock the door, raise here.
Whoops, what happened? All right, crank it. All right, so with this, it's, if you can imagine, it's the most common due to funding and time. It is easier to keep track of people with a smaller amount of time. So I don't know if you guys have ever had client work, but some clients, you'll see them for like 3 months solid, and then they're Casper, they're gone. You're literally like, what happened? I don't understand what happened with this person. I've reached out to them. I don't understand. And then they'll appear like a year later and be like, hey man, what's going on? You're my old therapist. I want to see you again. You're like, well, smokes, I'm glad you're alive type deal. But with that, cross-sectional is most common because in order to track people over long periods of time, it takes a decent bit of money. So that is why longitudinal, if you emphasize the word long, it's a longer type study. So data is collected over a longer period of time. Often we see multiple data collections. So the length of time we're looking at here is typically like, i.e., data collection is done at 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years. So a very common longitudinal study in the social work field, and if you guys have never heard of this study, please look it up. It's the ACE study. The ACE study was where it's the adverse childhood events, and it was tracked over long periods of time of if this is if you had this amount of trauma or this score on this study, then you had this amount of health conditions or this less amount of life expectancy type deal. So it was groundbreaking, but if you can imagine it, it takes a lot of money. So these studies take a lot of time and money to pull off. However, the trade-off, they are way more profound and their impact is huge. So if we did a longitudinal study, let's say on the rates of smoking comparative to people that do not smoke, it was very profound. People in the earlier times didn't think smoking was bad. We studied the effects of smoking and people literally lost their noodles. They're like, holy cow, I didn't know this is very bad. However, it is less common due to the funding, time, and being able to keep track of clients. Because clients will only come when they find benefit or have interest. So you'll see this a lot in your practice. If clients like you, you're probably not going to have a very low attendance rate. They'll show up and be like, oh my gosh. For example, hey, Phil, you'll never guess what the heck happened. And you're like, what happened? And then they tell you, and they just keep going. And they almost want to use you as somebody that is a resource for them. But that is what research is. So with that, I'm done doing the research. It makes sense to everyone. Okay. Get to it. All right. Sorry, guys. But with that, I'm going to move on to program development. So let's get down to developing. So program development. So with this, we have another little bit of steps, but this one's shorter because if you can imagine, we're only developing it. We're not doing anything else to this. So again, the first goal that happened before is going to stay true to this, as well as when we get into program eval. You're always going to want to identify the goal and aim of the program. Same thing with if you're working with a client. You always want to figure out what they would like to get out of it, so that way we can start navigating and doing it. And in the business realm, it's the vision and mission statement. So what does this actually look like on the bare bones? So like, what are you trying to implement / change / address? What particular impact would you like to see? So thus, when I started doing YouTube videos and study groups as well as tutoring, my goal or aim was to help people become more confident and proficient when looking and breaking down the questions. So that's like the bread and butter of my approach. If you guys have ever seen any of my videos, it's always like, this is the particular population and this is what we're trying to do. So this is where I had to decide, who are you trying to reach, help / improve? So if you can imagine, I wasn't out in front of mechanic shops saying, hey, do you guys need help with your ASWB practice exams? Or do you guys need help with breaking down the clinical exam or the master's exam? Or, hey, do you guys need information on research? They would look at me and say, you're nuts, please leave. But you have to know who the population is. So when we're developing the program, we have to keep what we're trying to do, and it has to be correct, connecting to the right people. And so thus, we also need to decide what resources that are currently available / are needed / are of interest. So with that, it was like, what information Well, you got a master's degree from U of M. They provided you with X amount of Z. And then this is where we need to know, where are you trying to implement the change / improve? So when I developed my approach, I was like, well, how do you watch a lot of your music, Phil? Oh, YouTube. Let's Google it up. And then a couple people's channels came up, watched what they did, and was like, I think this can be done a little smoother and in a slower and more articulate pace for some people's interest. Oh, so you're a visual learner, Phil. Oh, so maybe it'd be more beneficial if you showed it on the screen what you do. Okay, bet. So when we're deciding the what, the who, the where, the when, the what, there's this fancy thing called the needs assessment, which is an analysis of what a particular area / topic has and what they need to improve to their best functioning as possible. So going back to the study exam thing, what was needed? People needed confidence, and they needed something that they could understand and apply within the exam room. Like a lot of people have a lot of resources and knowledge. It's just hard to comb down and develop a pattern that they can utilize within it, which makes it difficult. But that's where having a routine and what's familiar. So what does this needs assessment actually do? So it defines what you are looking to solve / deciphers through any gaps or unhelpful information that could take away from the particular goal. So therefore, I wasn't entirely just going over like the KSAs, which are like the needed skills that they're addressing. I didn't go down and say, hey, here's all of the things that people in social work need to do. I was like, what are particular topics that are difficult for people to understand and work through? And I was like, oh, research is one of them. And then those that have been in my previous study groups, I often tell people that you can suggest the topic and we'll do it. And that's because it's meeting the needs of the people that actually attend and support me. So it also helps key partners, resources, funds, locations in previous studies. So a lot of people that have been rocking with me for a while know that I'm open to feedback. You guys say, hey, make sure people are muted throughout the entire study session. Bet. I'm going to make sure that's done. Make sure that we're able to actually have this recorded and remember to do it. Okay, I'll do that. Like if you noticed before I had started this group, I was like, Phil, start the recording. Phil, start the recording. Phil, if you do not start this recording, because if you're not meeting the needs of the people, you're not gonna have people come back. So with this, we often collect a small sample of target population. Well, a small sample of the target population to get their view and what would be most helpful to reach the most amount of people. So therefore, like when people stay after and provide me feedback or ask me questions, it almost helps me figure out what do people need. So those that were in the last study group know that the study group I'm doing next week is probably going to be the most helpful study group that I do to date, because I'm going to break down my exact test taking strategy, what each level means, how to identify each question, and then go through X amount of practice questions in front of you guys, like it's a YouTube video, but you guys get to interact and do it with me. So that's all based on your guys' feedback. And that was a needs assessment that I do like at the end of each of these. So we also need to determine what we can actually do as a result of it. But when people say, hey, can you do this monstrous topic? I'll try my best, but sometimes not. So then once we do all that, we need to share the findings with people who can help address the issues and make an impact. So once we do all of that, that is when we branch down to number 2, when we're actually going to define / solidify goals and objectives of the program / proposed program to adequately address / improve, because we sometimes can only improve the specific need. And what does this involve? We need to actually define what goal and objective is, because even though it seems like it's a pretty basic little task, sometimes they're very clouded. So what is the goal? It's the overall measurable outcome or change we would like to see as a result of the program implementation. And then the objective is more or less the skin. So if we were to say anything, the goal is the skeleton of the program, because it's the bones, it keeps us together. And the objective, which is the skin, is the specific measurable way we are going to accomplish the outcome or change we would like to see as a result of the program. And when we look at this, it's basically the skin of the program, because the goal is what our overall thing is, aka the structure we'd like to meet, and the objective is how we're actually going to hold it all together. And then once we do that, 3 is going to establish a let me put a little space between this. So this is where we want to establish a task force or killer team to get the job completed. And with that, once we do that, we need to keep in mind that this is the planning phase of the program. So with this, if you can imagine, with the planning phase, we assemble all of the resources we have available to us, and we available to us to get the objectives completed. So I don't know if you've ever seen like the Transformers movies or anything like that, but when it's game time, they all get together and they're like, "Yup, time to defeat this Decepticon." So what this actually looks like could be in the form of people, buildings, measurements, or assessment tools, vouchers, like if you're going to give incentives, transportation, if you want to like get that as a barrier not met, volunteers to get things done, as well as any missing parts. Because I don't know if you've ever planned a trip or anything. You think you're going to get everything together, and then it's like, I totally forgot something. Well, crap. So we also want to leave room for error here. So when you're planning something, you always want to leave something that possibly is going to help us. So with this, we also want to have a timeline, but not like one that is super strict. So when we want to roll out, roll out the program, and for how long? Because sometimes funding deems this, and if you can imagine, like, sometimes you're not able to actually get things done the way that you wanted to, so leaving yourself some flexibility, as well as we want to identify measures of what would be considered a success, well, consider success, or an appropriate level of impact to help continue the program in the future. Because that's ultimately our goal here when you're developing something, is you want it to sustain. So we need to set realistic goals. So if I was doing these study groups and was like, Phil, 100% of people need to pass or you stop doing this, you guys would have been like, where in the hell did Phil go? Phil go? Because it's impossible. But if I say, help as many people as you possibly can that are reaching out to you, that's more feasible. It's more vague, but you can't force something that is entirely not within your hands. Now, let's say I could take the exam for all of you guys, and I was like, Phil, you need to pass the exam every single time. Still a lot of pressure, but it's a lot more practical because I'm actually the one that's influencing this. But remember, we're a team, and if the team fails, or they succeed together. So once we get the identified goal, how we're going to do it, and gather the resources, this is where we do a soft launch, which is basically beginning to roll out the program to particular people, because you don't want to roll things out too quickly without a sample size. So like this is where we want to select a specific area or population. We are going to introduce the program to, and this is to evaluate the effectiveness of the program / how is it met? Because sometimes as social workers, as you could imagine, we have hella ideas of what we want to do. So we're like, we want to do all of these massive changes, but we haven't talked to the population we're trying to meet. So it's not met well, or we've exhausted a lot of time. But that's why we pick a specific sample size. And here we often don't really randomize it, because it's almost like a quasi experimental type thing of everyone gets the intervention. So it's often like to meet a need rather than to compare it to the overall society. So this is where we make adjustments to the program to ensure it is meeting the needs of the particular identified population. And then with this, you want to keep in mind the overall goal, because that's why we're launching, is to make sure that the overall goal is still being met. So the changes we need to make need to reflect the overall goal rather than something that we make up. That might be a different program. So this is where we want to have accountability or program team meetings to ensure everyone's perspective is met. Which, a little caveat here is, no one is perfect. So let's say I do the study group, take zero feedback from anyone, and say, it is what it is, guys. Have a fun time. This is my style. Enjoy it or not. How long am I going to be around? Probably not that long, unless we have people that are like just die hard, but that's where the soft launch happens. So once the soft launch goes through, we make the needed changes and adjustments. This is where we launch the program to the overall target population. And what does this look like? So this includes more people in the soft launch, and thus more resources are delivered to the target population. And from there, we make it, whoops, I need to move this down. So we make adjustments along the way, yet they are slower due to the system. And when I say system here, I mean program already being established. And from this, accountability is often placed in the hands of the people delivering the resources slash services. So this could be therapist, drivers, engagement specialist, etc. So this isn't the particular researchers or the program developers. Thus, administrative people aren't really overwatching. So whatever happens within the actual launch of the program is up to the people that are actually delivering it and whether they want to follow it or not. So we review the program. Review of the program is done around annually to ensure the overall program goal and objective. Well, goal is being met by the particular chosen objectives. Because remember, the objectives link us back to the particular goal. So with that, that is our program development. So does that make sense to everyone so far? Type yes in the chat if it makes sense, no in the chat if not. Coffee. I'm lost coming so late. Linda, the recording will be sent out. So, and I'll be sending out the Word document as well. So you'll be able to look at both of them. Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, so then it's going to be program eval. And then we'll do practice questions as well. So we're doing pretty well on time and stuff. So this is program evaluation. So welcome to the different sector. So program evaluation, or if you want to look at it from this, if you work in agencies and stuff, you probably heard the word audit and you're like, everyone panics. Why? Because we're actually looking what the particular program we're in does. So as always, the first step reigns pretty true and stays with us, is we need to identify the overall goal or objective of the particular program. Because if you're evaluating the program, you want to make sure you're doing the right area and the right people. So what does this look like? Again, it's going to be the mission and vision statement of the particular agency. And if it's a bigger agency, it can involve like multiple areas, but this typically involves talking to executive directors and program directors to ensure that their view of what the program is actually happening. So we talk to the program director, like, oh yeah, our outpatient substance use program is the best in the county. We have this going on and this going on. We walk into the outpatient clinic and none of those programs are going on, then we have kind of a problem, because audits and stuff are typically based on financial funding and stuff like that, which then needs to have us reviewing the policies and procedures of the agency / particular program of interest, because there can be particular evaluations of the agency overall or particular programs that we implement within the agency. So that's where it's kind of a bigger fish to fry, but one piece at a time, we can dissect the elephant quickly. So it also looks into the required trainings and competencies of the people that are delivering the services. So if I'm trying to have somebody to do cognitive behavioral therapy, and I look at their trainings and no one's trained in CBT, and we're trying to have everyone trained in it and they're doing DBT instead, it's like we have the BT in there, but we need to dial it back a letter and get back to the CBT. So that's what we like to see rather than what's actually happening. So number 2, this is where we actually just describe the characteristics of the agency / program of interest. And what's this going to look like? It's more or less just going to be doing the clients being served by the agency to help us guide which people we need to actually look at and talk to. And this is also, as stated before, the interventions that are being delivered to the clients, as well as hierarchies / hierarchical, oh, there we go, hierarchical chain of commands, i.e., who reports to who, and is it actually followed. An example of this, because this is kind of wonky little wording, example, therapist reports to supervisor, and supervisor reports to program director. However, if that's not followed, why not? And at what cost to people? And then D, make sure they are doing what / how they / doing what they are saying they are doing, and delivering services the way they say they are. So then we get into the third, and then this is where we engage in a process evaluation. And I will put an A next to it, because this is the first type of evaluation that we'll be going over that is particular to itself. So this is basically determining whether a specific program is being implemented as planned, and it's all about the process and is it being delivered like it was prescribed, i.e., in CBT, you will review how behaviors, how feelings and thoughts can influence someone's behaviors. However, if this is never discussed, the process was not followed. So it's making sure that people are doing what they're actually supposed to be doing. And this is what it helps identify any errors that exist within fidelity or doing what you say you are going to do, as well as measuring the particular results. And with that, it helps us to identify areas of improvement to help get the agency / program back on track to reach their overall program goal. And then another little caveat helps, well, it helps expand the program to other places. And a caveat here, if it is done, if it is done correctly. We don't need to be spreading like bad practice around, which is no. So then once we do all of that, we need to define outcomes to be measured, i.e., this is where we want to perform an outcome evaluation. So this is the introduction of the second one, or part B, because we have process and then we want outcome evaluation. And how much do we have left on this page? Yeah, I should slap it down. Beep, 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 beep. All right. So then we get on this, and then we do this. So what exactly is this step? Let's check. Oh, let's not do that. And then go back here. Okay. So what focus is being placed on making the change we intend to? And this is where focus is placed on the change, well, the needed change in competence, attitudes, behaviors that impact service delivery as well as client success. So essentially, are the people delivering the services well trained, lack bias, and open to the population they serve? So if you can imagine, if somebody hates the population they're serving and they're pretty jaded and worn out, they're probably not going to be wanting to better help this population. They're going to be looking at them wildly and would often get less client success. So this helps us to identify to what is needed to help get where the people delivering the service to an adequate level of competence / proficiency to reach the overall goal. And with that, are the programs causing change in a client's life, or is it hindering it? Like if someone's coming in jaded and not really wanting to help the client population, at what cost to the client? Well, they might be getting less adequate services, which thus could lower client success in wanting them to come back. So if in this group, I treated everyone poorly and ignored someone, then no one would really want to come back. Is the outcome strictly based on evaluating staff? So most typically, Misty, yes, because the people that are delivering the service is often going to help correlate to client success, which leads us into engagement or therapeutic alliance. The more connected a client feels to a therapist and the more open the therapist is, the better off client success as well as results are met. So then the last one is examine the results / success of the program, which there's no sense in collecting and evaluating if we do nothing with it. So this is basically what is needed to help the program gain further success / reach. Oh wow, that / reach more of the target population to help mobilize change. What trainings? What training? Well, training or trainings does the agency need to implement / provide to remain competent within a given practice area to ensure service delivery is meeting the overall goal of the program? And it always leads back to the overall goal, because we want to make sure that we're getting it. So well, it helps identify positive feedback and what strengths exist within the agency to help build future client success, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And then what would be most helpful in expanding the program to other agencies / what improvement areas exist, if any. And then once we have all of that, that is basically what it is. However, we have two types of program evaluation. So we have all of those, and I'll put C and D for them, because we already have A and B with process as well as outcome. So here we're looking at, more or less, we have good old formative, and then we have our good old summative. So formative, I'll highlight the word form, because this is essentially looking to develop the best form of a program being delivered. So that's not really essentially like a textbook version, but that's the quote that I would shove in there, is like, we're looking to develop the best form. So if you see the word form, it's like, oh, we're trying to make sure this is formed correctly. So what does that actually look like? It looks to examine the process of forming a program and identifies ways to improve it to produce the best possible product. And this is typically done when the program is in beta stage or soft launch mode. So if you remember back to developing the programs, soft launch was when we identified a particular target population and implemented it softly to them and refined things at this. So this is when programs are just getting started and are being created in the most efficient way possible. So it's open to feedback. / change can happen rather quickly. So this is done after a couple of months of program delivery. So done from the beginning to about after a couple of months, because if you remember right, in the soft launch, we typically are able to make changes relatively quick because we don't have a system established in place. And that leads us to our word summative, and then I will highlight this part of it, the summary, which if we add a couple letters looks like summary. So this is essentially this this is essentially the summary of the program. And what does it look like within this type of program evaluation is it's typically completed when a program is nearing the end of its implementation or has reached a particular previously identified time, such as annual / yearly reviews. And then when we're looking at this, it looks into the program effectiveness and identifies key areas of improvement and strengths to help build on the future. So it helps identify how a program can continue and expand. What is a beta stage? The beta stage, if you remember back into the program development, it was this stage right here, the soft launch, where we only roll it out to particular people. So beta stages are like the pre-stages to an actual program. And so does program evaluation make sense to everyone? And if it does, type the word coffee into the chat, because then I'll go over validity and reliability, and then we can whip out some practice questions. And if it doesn't make sense, type no in the chat so I know. Oh, okay. Okay. You guys are smart. Okay. So then we look into validity. So what is validity? And this is basically a measure to determine whether a program, assessment tool, or findings are aligned with what they are trying to measure. So an example, So an example of a validity would be, and there's different kinds of it, but Phil has developed study groups to help people obtain information about particular topics in a visual and audio form. So validity here would be, am I actually helping people when I'm doing this? if every time I do a study group, people are like, I have no clue what research is anymore. Phil was talking, he was providing examples, and I entirely have no clue what the subject actually means now. And it's like, his study groups probably aren't pretty valid then if they're not meeting the particular goal. And it's like, oh, okay. So it's not really valid if it's not meeting what it's supposed to. So essentially, to drive it home here, what are programs slash findings slash assessment tools slash information be considered valid or worth keeping around? Which oftentimes maybe not, because there's some information that you find and you're just like, holy smokes, that made 0 sense and I will never look at that ever again because it was dumb. So then we have our different types. We have 4 different types of validity. So we have this internal, and I'll move this down because that is going to bother me. And then we'll fill in that gap and then slap that away. So internal validity is where you think of the word inside. So are the findings consistent within our program slash study? So basically inside of our controlled environment, are the findings slash program slash measure successful, or did we miss the mark? If so, what do we need to change? And an example of this is, and we'll allude back to my study groups, I'm able to implement good comprehension comprehension of the information Phil shares when he is around. So when you guys are in my study group, you're understanding it. But when you're in my study group, another example, when I am inside of my dance class, I am able to perform the desired moves. So it'd be valid if I'm able to do so. If whenever you're in my study group and it makes less sense than it did before, then I don't have validity. Or if you're in a dance class with somebody and they're teaching you something and you're not able to do it while they're around, their class may not be valid or their teaching style for you may not be valid. So then we get into our external, and this is, are the findings consistent with our overall society / what is happening outside of our controlled environment. And a word that we often throw around here is generalizability. Is what is happening within our study generalizable to the overall population? Therefore, if we go and teach the information that I did here in, let's say, a YouTube video, and you guys pick up the things more consistent, but inside here you guys are more proficient and get the information well, I don't have external validity, but I have internal all around. External would be when I explain this to people within the group, people get it, and if I explain it outside of the group, people also get it. So I'll type that out. Example, when people review the information provided within my study groups, outside of the study groups, they understand it as well. And then another example, I am able to perform the dance moves I learned outside of my dance class when I share them with friends. They are able to do it as well. So like if you share my research and program development information with people that of interest of yours, and that's totally up to you if you guys do that, and they understand it too, then I'm externally valid. Like I'm cooking with what's happening outside of the group too, which then leads us into our next term, which is concurrent. And if you think of the word current, you can think of waves, and is it going with the flow or is it going upstream? Which when things go upstream, things typically go a little haywire. So are the findings comparable or consistent with other studies happening at the same time or that happen previous to my program / study? So if I'm teaching in a particular way and someone else is teaching in another way and people understand theirs better than they do mine, I may not have concurrent validity. But let's say I explain it a particular way and someone explains it similar to mine and they both get it, then we're both concurrent to one another. However, if one or the other doesn't, then we have an issue with concurrency. So an example, when people hear the information I share in my study groups, they are able to comprehend them equally as proficient or more proficient than other sources. And a key thing to keep in mind here is consistency is key. And if you are failing to meet the goals identified, what changes are needed to make the adjustment? Or if you are falling away from previous attempts / studies, how do you get back to your overall goal / objective? And with that, we have our last one, which is that good old predictive, which is, come on, are the findings consistent to what we thought we would find? How do they differ and why? So if we predicted something being totally different than it turned out, why is that so? So example, when I host my study groups, I hope people will feel more confident when they see research, program eval, and program development techniques. Questions. Sorry, my mind literally just went blank. Let's say another one, another overall predictive. I believe that people will become more competent around answering exam questions after they do tutoring with me. However, let's say more people fail than pass. I did not predict that very well, and I'm not very valid. Like, my measures aren't very valid. And then the last term, which is closely related to validity, is reliability. And basically this is saying, are the measures we are using consistent with what we are trying to find / are we able to find the same results with future attempts? So essentially we're saying can other people do the same study / program as you, and are they getting similar results? So an example of this would be an example would be someone else starts doing study groups on Sundays at no, let's not do that. Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and they plan to discuss the same content as me. Would they get the same results / interest? If so, that means what I'm doing is reliable. If not, then we have to consider, is their style different than mine? Or is it the actual study that I'm saying is reliable or not? Well, another reliability example would be when people use the acronym, they will have a higher likelihood to pass the exam. So higher reliability, people use it and pass. Low reliability, people use it and fail harder than ever. So that acronym would have zero reliability, and chances are people would be unable to use it. What is the difference between concurrent validity and reliability? Good question. So concurrent validity is, are the findings comparable or consistent with other studies? So validity is more focused on the content and reliability is more focused on the results. So the difference here is you're comparing your study to what other people have done. Reliability is other people's doing the same study as you are, and are they getting the same results? Like, let's say I gave people this exact printout, and then they tried hosting a research and programming eval and program development study group. Would they be able to deliver the same product and competency and comprehension as I did tonight? Maybe, maybe not, but that's often up to the way that they deliver it. So does that make sense? And that text box just disappeared. So okay, so does anyone have any other questions on this particular stuff? Because if not, I'm going to cut the recording off and we'll do the practice questions, and I'll cut it off because we had to do like polls and stuff like that. So that's where it gets kind of tricky. All right, so let's cut the recording.